Greetings, fellow humans. Katrina here. Quick disclaimer, I'm a professional, not your professional. Nothing I'm about to say should be taken as medical, legal, or otherwise advice. This podcast is purely for education and amusement. That is it. Disclaimer over. So I thought I'd talk a bit today about what I don't know about something called fatal familial insomnia. And yes, this is spurred straight out of an episode that I saw on television of something about the disease. And so I looked it up. And what I found was on the National Organization for Rare Disorders, rarediseases.org, they have a bit of information that was last updated July of 2023. And originally the information was published in 2018. So it gives an overview of the disease that I'll dive into. I'll talk about a little bit about a study that was done, just a brief summary of the overview of that study of fatal familial insomnia. What they did was a preventative treatment with doxycycline in a subject with a disease risk, so somebody who's a member of the FFI family. And that drug, like I said, was the doxycycline, which I'll say what class it's called. I won't dive into the specifics of what that medicine is or does, but then I'll talk a little bit about a novel study. So there was some information that came out in January of 2023. So that's about a year and a half from this recording, a year and a half ago. And so I'll read a little bit about that as well. So I'll apologize in advance for some of the sciencey language that I don't know how to pronounce specifically. I'll do my best. Here we go. So the fatal familial insomnia, according to the rarediseases.org, I should read the acknowledgments actually. So there was this person named James Mastrani, MD, PhD, professor, Department of Neurology, as well as the Helen McLorraine Neuroscience Investigator of the Brain Research Foundation. And they all assisted in the preparation of the report I'm about to just read. And I'll put the references in the information section. So here's the summary. Fatal familial insomnia, or FFI, as I'll refer to it sometimes, is a rare genetic degenerative brain disorder. It is characterized by an inability to sleep, which we call insomnia. That may be initially mild, but progressively worsens, leading to significant mental and physical deterioration. It's important to note that sleep is so important. Without sleep, our body does not function right. Our brain does not function right. So it's really important to get whatever sleep is necessary for you to function, which does differ from person to person. I've met people who can function on like 4 hours of sleep. Good for them. I need more like 8 to 10. Other people need different variations between, they say the average 8 hours is, I think, the average number of hours that they recommend per night for sleep. But obviously that's not feasible in everybody's situation. So I say get enough sleep that you can get. If that's 6 hours, if you can get 6 hours, cool. But back to what this is talking about. Affected individuals may develop dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system, the part of the nervous system that controls involuntary and automatic body processes. One thing I'll say about the autonomic nervous system is I think of the two different sides, like the sympathetic side, which is the alert and sends all the stress hormones. And then there's the parasympathetic side. I think of the word calm and para, because calm has 4 letters and para has 4 letters. So does rest, by the way. So the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system is the one that is for rest and digest. That's kind of how I remember that. But anyway, so which are things that happen without a person thinking about them. Those things like breathing, temperature regulation, sweating, the heart rate, all that is just automatically happening inside our body. It says that specific symptoms depend on the part of the autonomic nervous system that is affected by the disease. It says in all instances, so everybody with FFI is caused by an abnormal variant of the prion-related protein, PRNP, gene. Although sometimes the disorder occurs quite randomly without a PRNP gene, sporadic fatal insomnia, or SFI. The PRNP gene regulates the production of the hormone prion protein, of the human prion protein. Alterations in this gene lead to the genetic abnormality, shaped or misfolded prion protein, also known simply as prion, which is toxic to the body. In FFI, the abnormal prions build up primarily within the thalamus of the brain. It's a very important part of the brain. This leads to a progressive loss of nerve cells or neurons and the various symptoms associated with this disorder. There is no cure, but investigators are researching the best ways to treat and manage fatal familial insomnia. So it does say in here that FFI is classified as a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. Say that 5 times fast. Or a prion disease. Prion diseases are caused by the accumulation of, like I said, those misfolded prion proteins in the brain. 2 other prion diseases, Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease and Gertzmann-Strassler-Schenker syndrome, may also occur because of the variations of the PRNP gene. Although some prion diseases occur in the absence of genetic variation. Generally, prion disorders are characterized by long incubation periods with short clinical duration, which means the abnormal prions may accumulate for years without causing symptoms. So it has a long incubation period. But once symptoms begin, the disorder rapidly worsens. So here are some of the signs and symptoms. It is, like I said, progressive insomnia. The insomnia begins during middle age, but it can occur earlier or later in life. Insomnia may at first be mild, but then it becomes progressively worse until an affected individual gets very little sleep. Insomnia usually and suddenly can rapidly worsen over the next few months. When sleep is achieved, vivid dreams may occur. The lack of sleep leads to physical and mental deterioration, and the disease ultimately progresses to coma and eventually death. Although insomnia is usually the first symptom, some individuals may present with progressive dementia, in which there are worsening problems with thought, cognition, memory, language, and behavior. Initially, the signs may be subtle and include unintended weight loss, forgetfulness, inattentiveness, problem concentrating, or speech problems. Episodes of confusion or hallucinations may eventually occur. Some affected individuals experience double vision, diplopia, or abnormal jerky eye movements, which is called nystagmus. There may be problems swallowing, dysphagia, or slurred speech, dysarthria. I feel like I slurred just saying that. Dysarthria is slurred speech. Some individuals eventually have trouble coordinating voluntary movements. That's ataxia. Abnormal movements, including tremors or twitchy, jerking muscle spasms, which is called myoclonus, or Parkinson's-like symptoms may also develop. Additional symptoms involving dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system often develop. Specific symptoms can vary from one person to another based on the specific part of the autonomic nervous system affected. Common symptoms can include fever, rapid heart rate or tachycardia, high blood pressure or hypertension, increased sweating or hyperhidrosis, increased production of tears, constipation, variations in body temperature, and sexual dysfunction, including erectile dysfunction. Anxiety and depression are common findings as well. It goes into kind of the causes of it, talking a little bit more about the prions, but I think I'll skip ahead to the affected populations. It says FFI is an extremely rare disorder. The exact incidence and prevalence of the disorder is unknown. The sporadic form of FFI, also known as sporadic fatal insomnia, is extremely rare and has only been described in the medical literature in a few dozen people. Collectively, prion disorders affect 1 to 2 persons per million in the general population per year. Genetic prion diseases are thought to make up about 15% of individuals with prion diseases. Because rare diseases often go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, it is difficult to determine their true frequency in the general population. FFI affects males and females in equal numbers. The average age of onset is 45 to 50 years old, although the disorder has been described in individuals in their teens and as late as their 70s. FFI has been described in populations around the world. So a disorder with similar symptoms. There are some things that are very similar. Sometimes frontotemporal degeneration or Alzheimer's disease, which is a progressive condition. Additional disorders that can be signs and symptoms similar to those seen in prion diseases like FFI include Huntington disease, progressive spine, I don't know how to say that, progressive supranuclear palsy, dementia with Lewy bodies, corticobasal degeneration, Hashimoto encephalopathy, paraneoplastic syndromes and multiple system atrophy. And it does say, for more information, choose the specific disorder name and put it in the search term in the rare disease database, and it should pop up with more information. And it does say that they do a significant detailed patient history before diagnosing that. I do think there are specific families that it runs in. That's the genetic component. And it says that there are standard therapies, but there is no cure. So the treatment is directed towards management of the specific symptoms that are apparent in each individual. Treatment may require the coordinated efforts of a team of specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, pain specialists, social workers, and other healthcare professionals may need to plan treatment systematically and comprehensively. Psychosocial support for the entire family is essential as well. Genetic counseling is recommended for the affected individuals and their families. I guess that would tell them whether or not they have that PRNP genetic component or if it's sporadic. There are no standardized treatment protocols or guidelines for affected individuals. Due to the rarity of the disease, there are no treatment trials that have been tested in a large group of patients. Various treatments have been reported in the medical literature as part of single case reports or a small series of patients. Treatment trials would be very helpful to determine the long-term safety and effectiveness of specific medications and treatments for individuals with FFI. Symptomatic treatments include anti-seizure or anti-epileptic medications for seizures or clonazepam for twitching movements, myoclonus. Affected individuals may also be advised to discontinue any medications that worsen confusion, memory, or cause insomnia. Now, this was written back in, but it was updated. It was written originally, I think, in 2018, but it was updated in July of 2023. It says, as of July 2023, there were no specific therapeutic trials for FFI. And so since that time, there has been one, and that was March 30th of 2023. This was posted on clinicaltrials.gov, the National Library of Medicine, and I will put the link in the description, and I'll give you the brief summary. And again, there's a lot of sciencey words, but we'll do our best. The neurodegenerative disorders is a class of pathologies including very common diseases as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, or is very rare as fatal familial insomnia. The progression of the disease with no therapeutic remedy is the common track of these disorders. The aim of this project is to carry out a preventative treatment in subjects with a genetic risk to develop FFI to avoid the establishment of the disease. FFI is a rare genetic neurodegenerative disease characterized by, as I mentioned before, the disrupted sleep, the autonomic hyperactivation, and motor abnormalities with fatal exodus. FFI is inherited in an autosomal dominant fashion and is linked to the D178N mutation in the prion gene. Remember that PRNP gene I mentioned before? In association with the methionine at the polymorphic codon, I don't know how to say that word, CODON 129. About 30 FFI pedigrees have been described worldwide, the first case being reported in 1986 in North Italy. And I would like to say that this is a professional website with a few typos. I noticed in the very first sentence, it said this is a class O pathologies, and that word should have been of in this sentence. The first case of being reported in 1986 in Northern Italy. It's spelled MFIRST, and that is not how you spell that word. Anyway, this patient turned out to belong to a large kindred which spans 7 generations, dating back to the 18th century. Many people belonging to this genealogy still live in the Veneto region of Italy, and they are part of the association, or part of an association. The genetic screening of 85 subjects belonging to this family permitted to identify the mutation carriers. Since the disease is aggressive and affected people usually died within 13 months of the onset, the possibility of an efficacious therapy when the disease becomes evident is a little unrealistic. This condition indicates in a prevention approach the better conditioned to affect the disease. Experimental studies and clinical observation indicated that the antibiotic I said it earlier, I can say it again, doxycycline, there we go, as a potential candidate for treatment in FFI subjects. The age with maximal risk to get the disease is between 50 and 55 years old. Thus, the carriers that were born between 1958 and 1969 will be recruited for preventative treatment with doxy for 10 years at the end of this period, or before we can establish if doxy can be useful to avoid the development of FFI. And if you heard before, I struggled with it, but the doxycycline, there we go, is actually part of a class of medications called tetracycline antibiotics. And it does work to treat various infections. I believe it's prescribed for a variety of ailments. And this is the study that it had was using that medication. But then there was a new one. So I did a little more digging. In January 19th of 2023, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases published a blog that said a novel study model reveals new understanding of fatal familial insomnia. And so it says here, in a new study published by PLOS Genetics, scientists from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases developed a cerebral organoid model to study the exact protein mutation that causes FFI. Human cerebral organoids are small balls of brain cells ranging in size from a poppy seed to a pea. Scientists use human skin cells to create organoids, and cerebral organoids have organization, structure, and electrical signaling systems similar to human brain tissue. Because they can survive in a controlled environment for months to years, cerebral organoids are also ideal for studying nervous system diseases over lengthy periods of time. And in that new study using FFI organoids, what was that called? The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. It has the acronym, but I'll just say it. Scientists working at Rocky Mountain Laboratories in Hamilton, Montana, compared cell functions, primarily in neurons, between the FFI model and organoids without the FFI protein mutation, making several important observations about the mutation's effect on brain cells. They believe the abnormalities likely are features of asymptomatic FFI that may lead to the disease. They surprisingly, this is the weird part, they did not observe spontaneous change in shape or spread of the FFI protein to additional prion protein. Such spread typically is a trademark of a prion disease, changing prion protein throughout the brain from a normal shape to the malfunctioning folded shape. And it says, quote, our findings show that the mutation causes the brain cells to dysfunction without the need for misfolding. The study states, we could confirm that most changes were caused by the presence of the mutation rather than interacting with prion protein lacking the mutation. Further, the group found that the neurons in the FFI organoid model were impaired because of damaged mitochondria, which typically produce energy to keep the brain cells healthy. In future studies, they hope to establish a relationship between the impaired mitochondria function and the mutated FFI prion protein, and whether neurons attempt to stay healthy and avoid harm from the mutated FFI prion protein by switching from mitochondria as an energy source. They also plan to explore the relationship between the mutated FFI prion protein and the neurons associated with, quote, wakefulness, sleep, and rapid eye movement in the brain. Like I said, I will put all of the reference information in the information box. If you choose to dive even deeper, you can read through all the things that I read through. I only read snippets. I didn't read the entire excerpts of the pages that I was reading from. So if you would like to support the show, go ahead and do so by clicking the button on the website. And remember, I appreciate each and every one of you simply for existing.